What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Black Belt Business Podcast. I'm your host, Elliot Marshall, and it is my goal with each episode of this podcast to share the stories, strategies, tactics, tools, and resources that will help you establish or grow your martial arts school. The Black Belt Business Podcast is brought to you by Easton.Online. You can find all of our digital courses, martial arts curriculums, and resources designed to help you enhance your business at Easton.Online. So without further ado, let's jump into the episode. Fellas, what's up? How are you? Don't forget, we got to pull those microphones close. That microphone close. Who wants to go first? Go ahead first, Mike.
No, please, Ian.
How are you?
I'm good. Good. Mike, how are you?
I am wonderful.
Good.
I'm excited to talk about delegation.
Yes, and we're going to get there. So real fast, just, I don't know, since the last time you guys have been on when we first started, I think maybe both of your positions have changed. Mike, not too much, but officially, but Ian, your position has definitely changed. You were just the general manager of the Denver location, and now you've kind of moved on to this new role of you explain it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I actually think the last time we spoke, I was just in the process of making that transition, and yeah, essentially, I was the general manager of the Denver location, and now I am helping to support all of the general managers with their locations. So, the analogy I've sort of been drawing is when you're a GM, you're sort of captaining your ship, and then now I am, I guess, the admiral, and I'm captaining, or I am helping. Again, support all the general managers with their own ships, and it's definitely more challenging, I think, for me, because it's a new position and it's something I'm not comfortable with. But I felt like this when I was a GM. I think it's good to feel like an imposter in the beginning. If you're too sure of yourself, maybe that's a problem. But that's kind of where I am.
Oh, maybe we'll get into this a little bit in the delegation piece and stuff. So we'll see.
You're guiding the fleet. That's what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Is there an official title to your role?
Yeah, it's the director of general managers.
Got it. Oh, we did speak right when we did a podcast about coming out of COVID and dealing with it, and you guys were already, never mind, with the roles that you're in. We did it a couple months ago.
Was it?
Yeah, it was a couple months ago.
Yeah, it was about a year ago.
Maybe a year ago, but you were moving into your roles. I was thinking the first time we ever talked on the Easton.Online podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So,
No, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while since then. And Mike, you are still the CEO, yeah?
Yeah. If I say stuff that's completely out of line on this, which I'm probably going to today, you can edit it out, correct?
Already live.
Oh no. Okay, good. So I won't.
we're streaming live to
I know,
Facebook.
already,
Mike.
I said something I don't like. I want to take back.
We're streaming live to Facebook and YouTube as we speak.
I didn't see any cameras up.
Yeah, no, we're not
Social
streaming
media.
live.
That'd be fun though. I'd be down for that. We should just do it.
We should do a live one?
Oh yeah, because I will. Yeah. Who knows what will come out of your mouth? I'm doing live stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's the hard part of Rogan, right? Is he's live and then he can't edit it. You know, when he says something dumb, you just got to like quadruple down on it.
I think I'm gonna get this mic in the right spot throughout this process.
All right. Well, we'll never need to again because I'm going to go buy another one tomorrow when I drive to Denver. So
This isn't awkward.
yeah. All right, guys. I think the big thing that the two of you have done, and one of the big things that you guys have done is really systematize what we do and then make it so that you give the work to other people a lot, right? Like as far as like not give the work, obviously you work a ton, but this delegation piece, and it can be so hard, not only for martial arts school owners, but for business owners in general. And I think sometimes it can be hard for martial arts school owners, you know, jiu-jitsu, let's say, because you're a black belt, right? And you got really good at jiu-jitsu. And for some reason, you think that means you do everything else in the business really well too. And well, anyway, that's what we run into with Easton.Online a lot, right? Is everyone's like, no, I know how to, I'm a black belt, right? And that's true. And for me, I guess, being a black belt only means that you're pretty good at doing jiu-jitsu. It has nothing to do with teaching jiu-jitsu. It has nothing to do with running the school, answering the phones, none of that stuff, right? So first, let's go into how did you learn it? Right? How did we as a company learn it and you know, and those things? And then how did you start to train people, delegate, and give it away so that you could move on to growing the business, right? Which is a massive piece that I think is worked on now, especially by you, Mike, right? So where did this learning process start?
Do you want to take this one?
Sure.
And I'll just correct you afterwards if I don't like what you say.
Yeah, you can go that route. Yeah, well, I think first of all, I think it starts with reading and recognizing that there's something wrong if you're doing everything, right? So to your point, you just talked about being really good at jiu-jitsu, and I think what you're describing is being a technician. And one of the books that was really influential initially for me and for Mike, I'm sure, is The E-Myth. And if you haven't read it and this is something you are interested in, you should read it. And it talks about this. It talks about how one of the biggest mistakes you can make is to be a technician and think that's how you run your business. So it's like, and sort of the mindset there is, I'm really good at jiu-jitsu. Nothing can be done right unless I'm doing it, so I'm going to do it all. And that is sort of a recipe for disaster, because you never get a chance to actually work on the business if you're always working in it. So like the story I like to tell, like where I read this book a few times, and it didn't really hit me until I was in Hawaii. You know, and you had, you know, basically I had been probably working in Denver for about a year and a half, 2 years. And I was probably working something like 60 or 70 hours a week in the business, just grinding. And we went to Hawaii, and the first half of the trip, I was calling like almost every other hour.
How mad was Mike at you?
He was frustrated, you know what I mean?
I was busy enjoying myself.
But this is my first time being away from the school, right? And
Since you took over.
Yeah, since I had taken over, and I was calling constantly, and it got to the point where Van, who is, you know, someone I worked very closely and still do work closely with, was finally like, hey, can you like chill and stop calling? You know, it's basically like it's annoying. And so my fear was at this point, is this place going to crumble if I'm not there? You know what I mean? This place, like I do so much over there, like if I'm not there, what's happening? You know, and so that was the anxiety. But then right when I spoke to Van and I found out that everything was fine, it was replaced with a new fear. And the fear is that I'm not needed, right? It's like, maybe I'm not needed. Oh my God, the place is running and they don't need me at all. What value am I providing if I don't have to be there? And the epiphany that, you know, I was like laying awake, what finally hit me, I was like, being a good manager means you should be able to be putting the right people in the right seats who can do an excellent job, and then you get to sit on the outside and watch the machine run, right? And you know, it's like watching a bunch of plates spinning, and if you start to see a plate wobble, you can go and sort of correct, you know, sort of straighten it out. But that's what I think being a good manager is, and the reality is that there's always, you know, when the times are slow, because you will have those where things seem to be running really well. Enjoy it, because it never stays that way. There's always, you know, life is just full of problems. You wake up every day and there's problems that you have to solve, but it's really hard to solve the problems if you're just buried in the day-to-day, you know, functions of the business. So that was a big thing for me.
I think Henzo says it best, right? If you wake up one day and you have no problems, well, that means you're in heaven and you're dead, you know? So, you know, if you have problems, thank God, it means you're alive. Mm-hmm. So, Mike, go ahead, your take.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that Ian is he's a hard worker, and he hates himself if things are not going, if he's not working his ass off. So it's important that we have him to do that. You know, you'll have all those people in your company, and his OCD also helps with this. So it is a great, you know, his sickness does help us succeed quite a bit, honestly. So we're very fortunate to have him.
Whether it's good for him or not.
Whether it's good for him or not, that's a different story.
We'll figure that out later. But, you know, yeah, it's good for us.
But Ian's not a victim, so he's going to figure it out every time. All of that is meant as a compliment, by the way.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm off that way.
Yeah.
That's how I took it. His crippling anxiety is a real boon.
It is. It is really. If you can find an Ian with crippling anxiety that will always.
Well, you found another one at your other business in his brother.
Yeah.
So yeah,
exactly.
You're set, Mike.
The Liebermans are really gold.
Yeah,
I must say. But all jokes aside, I think it's the same problem we all face. Just to piggyback off of what Ian said, there is that moment where you go out of town and you're a little bit worried. Everybody's been there, right? If you haven't, then you don't own a business or you've never managed or led. You go out of town, you worry like crazy, and then you come back and things are actually better. The numbers are up, the sales are better, the clients are happier, the people are happier, everything got done, and you're like, shit, I'm not needed. And you have that moment of like, oh no, I'm not needed. But it almost happens every time that if you pay attention to it, that when you leave town and you come back, things are actually better than where you left it if you do a decent job managing. Because your staff and your team, I don't want to say your staff, your team knows how to do things if you train them well, and they're excited to take the reins and show you what they're capable of. So I think it's important that we recognize that and celebrate it, and not like, it's okay to feel down about yourself and worry about that, of course. But I think it's important to celebrate the team and what they're actually capable of. And you are needed in a way, but it's amazing what they can do without you. I always like to pay attention to that.
All right, so now to the second hardest part, or the hardest part. Maybe, I don't, either you letting go, the leader letting go, the boss, in a sense, letting go, to actually getting the team to be able to do the work, right? And I think, like, these things can be so, like, I'm a terrible manager. Like, I'm an awful manager. Like, I can remember, and I love him, Chris Green, and I was telling you the story the other day. I would pull him in the office and look at him and be like, yo, bro, why the fuck didn't you do the contact logs? And I couldn't grasp it, right? It didn't grasp it, and it would come out of my mouth just like that. Why the fuck didn't you do the contact logs? And I was hoping that anger that I was showing towards him and frustration would then make him do the contact logs. And it did for 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks later, there I was again. Why the fuck didn't you do the contact logs? So what do you do? Where do you start with being able to delegate and get people to actually do the work?
So I think I think Ian should take. Ian is an incredible manager, but he's also, I think, the best at people development that I've seen. He's really good at meeting people where they're at. So I think he should take this question, but to lay the foundation a little bit, which you've all heard a million times, I hope, if you're listening to Easton.Online or following what we do, is you have to build the foundation first and then set the strategy and goals. So if you set up your foundation, right, like get your core values in place and all that, then you know who you are as a company. And then you set your purpose, like where you're headed, like why you're going, what your North Star is, so everybody knows where to go, right? So that way you have the right people on the team with core values. You know where you're going with your purpose and vision. And then you set big goals, like big BHAGs or quarterly rocks, whatever you want to call it, big goals that you're striving towards to get to that North Star. So then everybody has a mission and they have the right people on the bus. Now after that, it's about accountability and management. The leader's job is to make sure they're setting that vision and making sure there's a strategy.
I want to stop you for a sec, okay? And I know we'll get into this. We'll go dive down more of the training piece. But you said the foundation, the core values, the purpose, and stuff like that. I'm just gonna say it because martial artists can sound like this. Man, fuck that. That sounds like some bitch shit, right? Like we're not doing that. We're fighters. We this is what we do, Yeah, how do we get over that? Like when you sit down with your team and you're like, yo, we're going to have core values. And right now, all you have is these dudes and these ladies that want to choke people out and do jiu-jitsu and teach it and yada, yada, and I don't believe any of this, but I'm just kind of trying to make this argument towards you.
I think it's a good argument. I think Ian will probably have a more articulate point. I'll just make mine really quickly. I love his take on it. I would say that everybody needs to have values to survive. Like if we go back to, thousands of years, like tribalism alone, those 150 people, they operated on values to stay within that tribe. And if people did not stay within those values, they would be excommunicated from that tribe. And then they'd have to go be out on their own and alone trying to figure out what to do next. So values.
And that meant death.
And that meant death.
That meant death,
right?
10,000 years ago, yeah.
And nothing has changed. If you want to go to like the Vikings or the Middle Ages or the Knights, I don't care. Name an era where you think these people are badasses. There are still values they base their team off of. Maybe they're not the same values you and I have, but there are values that have to exist as a unit. And if you don't have values, to bring it up to modern times, we can fight, we can walk around with fucking clubs and rape and pillage and do all these horrible things, but guess what? That doesn't last for long, and that crumbles around you. Maybe you can set a group of 3 guys that you have those kind of horrible values with, but you're not going to be good human beings. And martial artists are not just about being a badass on the mat. It's about sharing these values that you can perpetuate across everybody you touch. So I think I think for me, or when I hear that, if anybody has that comment, it's just based off ignorance, right? And it's not really looking back on history or whoever they value, whoever their mentor is, whoever they look to, their community, that individual's community was based off of a set of values to keep that group together. And then there was a vision and a purpose to keep that group going. Even if it's Genghis fucking Khan, they had values they lived by, and they had a vision, and they conquered the world. Right?
We don't agree with them now, maybe, right?
We don't agree with them,
for sure.
but there were values, to make it work. Otherwise, you're just fucking lost.
Doing whatever. That was a great answer.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think you said that pretty well. I don't have a ton to add to it, except for the fact that, like you said, Mike, even when you talk about Genghis Khan, there are values. They're not values that we share, but they were values. And I think maybe understanding the importance of having values as a company, it would be a good starting point. And it's like once you have core values, you start finding out who on your team shares them and who doesn't. And basically what I really noticed, it becomes the prism through which you make all decisions. If you don't have that, it's like the core values become a compass. And without them, it's very easy to get lost. And you end up in this place where every person that you look at next to you, you might be connected to them, but you don't really know why. And it just makes guiding and your community, your culture, and your business incredibly difficult. So I think understanding the importance of them is fundamental to being successful with them. But this changed everything for us. Like this was the moment I felt that Easton changed. We sat down in a room. And you might find out when you sit down to find your values, you might find out, maybe you sit down with 4 or 5 people, you might find out that one person in that room or 2 people, they don't share your values. And that's a deal breaker right there. And this is where, this is where I think this is the takeoff point, in my opinion, or was the takeoff point for Easton.
Can I just jump in on add something to that I thought was interesting that you said? With all of this, we're talking about the philosophical points behind it, and for me personally, what I really get out of podcast is the philosophical point, and then tools you can use to get to that philosophical point. Because we can talk the philosophy and the why and the history all day, which I think is really important to understand the why. But I think to really make these things work, you have to get the tools to progress forward. And Easton.Online has that. There's books that you should always add that with. But one of the tools I think that you really need to pay attention to is you have to make the decision you're going to do it, right, with your team. And maybe it's just one person that has the thought, right? It's just one person. Like Amal had the thought of bringing jiu-jitsu to the U.S., one of the people that brought it to jiu-jitsu to the U.S. And this person has a thought, and then that individual has to bring it to the team and then move forward. And once you move forward, you have the meeting, and you make it intense. It's going to be hours of work, but you have to sit down and make it work. And then the last thing I would say, and there's processes for all of this, is you have to write it down. You can't have this pie in the sky shit. You can't have this idealism. If it's not written in words, if it's not on paper for all of you to see, and then you're not living that, then it's pointless to have the conversations. We can talk all day about the way things should be, blah, fucking blah. But if we don't write it down and then live it, then it's just fucking all wasted time. And man, for me personally, I don't know about all of you, like the last thing I want to do is waste any fucking time in my life. There's nothing that upsets me more than wasting my time.
I'll waste money all day before I waste time. Ian, I really like you said about the compass piece, right? And I know the image that I got is, when you want to head south, let's say, the what's it called? The point on the compass is, I don't know, the thing, that says the pointer. It's never actually, when you look at it, steady south. It always bumps a little bit and then corrects, and then it bumps left and corrects. And you do that with your core values, right? Like, it's not like these values, we're not perfect, right? You mess them up, I mess them up. Ian rarely messes them up. I'm joking, yeah. But it bumps and then you pull it back, and then it bumps the other way and you pull it back, but it's you're headed south right now, you're headed north.
It gives you the bumper. I like that.
Yeah. And I don't know why it just came to my mind. We've said compass forever, but that was the first time I was like, oh man, the dial does this, So once you establish this foundation and everyone knows where they're going, which is a very hard thing, right? That was hard enough. And now you get down to this, like, okay, I'm going to train these people to do the work so that I don't have to do it, and I can go on vacation and I can just worry about whether they're doing it or worry that I'm not needed anymore. How do you start this training?
So, a couple things. I want to go back to Chris Green because I think it highlights something very important.
And look, by the way, we love Chris Green.
Well, yeah,
like, I love that
I'm
dude.
Going to talk. I know you do, and
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about that. I think so. When I said something like, it's the core values are, a sort of prism that we look through to make all of our decisions, and I think that's a pretty nebulous thing to say. So here's like an example. Chris Green, and this is something, was trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. Right, and one of the things that Mike had mentioned, a bus. Like, we all want to make sure that we're on the bus, and a good way to start thinking about your team is, are they on the right bus? And that's the core value question. Chris absolutely shares our values, right? Just to talk about core values a little bit more, and I love what Mike said about writing them down. They can't just be core values that when I walk in the doors of Easton, I start living them. And this is an important thing to me. Like, I have heard people make this claim like, oh yeah, I love working for, or I love him outside of work, but I hate him, he sucks to work with and for. Right? You're the same person when you wake up in the morning in your house that you are when you walk in the doors of your academy. If you are not living by these core values, it can't just be how you run your business. It needs to be how you live your life. And if they're too disparate, if your core values, if the way you're living your life is diametrically opposed to how you're running your academy, you're going to fail. You have to. This needs to be a thing. And I loved what you said, Elliot, about having, it's sort of the direction kind of wavers, because we trespass on our core values, but you can't violate them, right? And there is a difference there. We're all human. We make mistakes. And the way I always think about this is, you wake up in the morning, you have these values, and when you go to bed at night, it's like, did you move further or closer to them? And you get to ask yourself that honestly every night. But back to Chris Green, where does that fit in? Well, Chris Green was on the bus. He has our values. We know that we want him on the bus.
And he was working for us before values, though.
Yeah, he was working for us before values, but I can
Right.
look back at this retrospectively and say that he absolutely shared our values. And Chris Green, I just saw him a couple weeks ago. He came into the academy. He, I think he lives back east now, but he's a good friend. He's a huge Easton supporter, and he's always been a part of the family because he shares our values. But what I figured out, and this was a huge moment for me, I had him in the wrong seat. He was on the wrong seat in the bus. On the bus, but wrong seat. And so one day, because I had the same issue, and I spoke to him. I said things in a nice way, a mean way, and every which way, and got nowhere. And what I shortly realized was, it wasn't for a lack of effort. It wasn't for a lack of that he didn't care. It was that this wasn't his strong suit. And so I moved him from being at the front desk, which is a ton of admin stuff and multitasking, and I moved him over he became our maintenance manager. And literally overnight, he became our best employee in Denver. Right? I mean, it was overnight. And that was because I took someone who had our values, he shared them all, right? And he wanted Easton to succeed. And I moved him to a place where he thrived. And what's cool about this is he became, he went from he got into like the handyman stuff, and he's now a flight mechanic. And so he ultimately left Easton to pursue what his real strength is, and he's been thriving there. And that was like a lesson for me in being able to see where people, where their talents and strengths lie, and trying to find that, because when you do, everything, there's not this friction,
Right. And look, I mean, to cap off the Chris Green point here, and how much we love him is for me, it's two stories. One, I was in North Carolina over the summer, and he lived in Virginia, and he saw on Facebook or Instagram, wherever, that I was going to North Carolina, and he drove down, like on his day off, to like see me and my family, introduce me to his wife. I was like, yo, dude, like, this is a 5-hour drive. You don't got to do this. And so that's one, we are very important to him. And like, when he comes back to town, he's seeing you.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way he's not seeing you, and he'll make a trip just to do it. And two, on the value piece, as far as like, people messing up, that dude got arrested at work twice. Like, taken out of the school in handcuffs. And it wasn't his fault. Like, his roommate had messed up, and his roommate had a firearm, and Chris wasn't allowed to be in a house with a firearm. And so then they saw that Chris lived there, and they came and arrest him. It's like, it's not mine. I didn't even know my roommate had it. So, and then they came and arrested him again the second time when something happened. We did not fire him either time for that. Mm-hmm. Right? I think we paid for his lawyer.
Yeah, neither one of those things were against our values. He didn't do anything that we would consider, they were mistakes, but they weren't like assaults.
Right, but it's bad for us. It's not a good look for us that they're coming and arresting your employee at work.
No, but if it's something that doesn't fall against our values, like if it was like something like rape or a sexual assault or one of these type of things or theft, it'd be a very different story. But these things that, man, we teach people how to fight and help them and help them understand that work. And part of his past was probably from some of that stuff, some of the violence with other people.
Right.
And we understand that. And we are willing to work past it as we should be. People do grow.
Right. So like when we talk about this values piece, it's not always about money. Right? Like that probably wasn't good for our money maybe in the time. Like maybe somebody was I don't remember. Maybe someone's trying to sign up and the cops walk in and arrest the dude that's signing them up. Like it's bad.
Yeah, and I think like, there's that saying, you'll lose money and friends to stick to your core values, and I think that's a really important thing because we've lost a lot of friends along the way. The back to the bus analogy. I want to talk about sort of an opposite of this, right?
Right.
So Chris was you can have a right person in a right seat, wrong person, wrong seat. So there's right person, right seat, wrong seat. And you can have sort of any sort of variation of those two things. A harder thing to see is the wrong person in the right seat, right? So this is someone who maybe is an incredible instructor. They're badass on the mat, right? Maybe they're even good at maybe they're good at everything in the company, right? They crush sales, like they're just a rock star, but they don't follow your values. And that means you have a wrong person in the right seat. And the problem here, what you run into, and we've all had this as a manager, is like, man, this person is causing a lot of drama. They're damaging our culture, but they do a really good job, and replacing them is going to be too much of a headache. Those are the people you need to remove.
But these are the hardest ones.
Hardest ones.
They're very hard, right? Because and speaking from my personal experience, right? Not naming names, but man, like a very good friend of mine, who I still, if I'm being honest, like I still have, I dream about. Like, I mean, this is a guy who I lived with for a decade, and I, part of me still loves the guy, and obviously Mike, everyone at this table was very good friends with him.
We all genuinely loved him.
Yeah, and he was just, and he was just acting. He wasn't following our values, but he was amazing on the mat. He was a great instructor. The guy was. If
you wanted him to sell, he could probably crush the front desk.
He could do everything. I mean, the guy was
right, Mike. I mean, he did good.
Extremely high IQ.
Yeah, the guy he's very bright. But he just was. He was behaving poorly, and that was my first real interaction with living by your core values, and it wasn't an easy one. But if you're going to have core values, the point is, you have to, you can't just have them on a piece of paper and just have them hang on the wall. You got to live by them, and you have to hire by them and fire by them, and every decision you make has to be in line with them. So that's kind of the thing.
I had a question just because I like this. For me, the favorite part of all this stuff is the learning piece. And I was curious, Ian, do you have any thoughts? One, for discovering if it's either a wrong bus or wrong seat issue, and then, tools or ideas or management.
You mean wrong person, wrong seat?
Yeah, wrong person. Or either one, right? Either they're on the wrong bus, whatever the negatives, right? Okay. Whichever one. Do you have any ways to identify and how to solve those problems, like that could be useful for the listeners?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, there's like you can have like a scorecard, right, for people. But I think the real thing is being honest with yourself. Like, for me, like there's the people analyzer chart, which I think we can talk about, and that's a great tool, right? Essentially, you write down all your core values, and then you write down your principles, and you can give people, grades. I don't want to get too into the weeds there, but it's a great tool, and we can maybe link to it on this podcast. But
Phipps, you got that? The people
could
analyzer
you give
tool?
a little bit more briefing of there's the GWC piece. I think just
Yeah.
I think give it 2 minutes.
Sure. So you have the core values, you grade them on the core values, and then you have the GWC. And the GWC stands for got it, wants it, and then capacity to do it, right? The get it, or the do they got it, means do they understand the job? Do they understand what the job entails, right? Do they want the job, right? That obviously those are very important. The next one is the capacity to do it, and this is really, do they have the time? Right? Is it something that they can do? Like, they even have the bandwidth to do, and do they have the ability to do it? Right? Is like, because not everybody can do everything. Like, right? I'm not going to I don't have the capacity to go be a computer programmer. I'm not good at math. It's not my strength. And Chris, just like Chris, didn't have the capacity to be great at.
So, man, how did you see it, Ian? Like, how did you see with Chris, for example? And I know I'm cutting you off maybe for a second. Sorry. No. Like, all right. So he was butchering the front desk job. The only thing he could do is sell.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you not just fire that dude when it looks like he doesn't have the capacity? He gets it. He wants to work for us. The problem was capacity.
Right.
So how do you realize in that moment, be like, okay, it's not you're fired. It's I need to find a different seat for you. How do you realize that?
Well, so at the time, I'm a different. Now I'm much more experienced now than I was. But at the time, right?
Because it's a low-level job.
Yeah.
It's not a high-level job.
And here's what I saw. So at the time, I remember my thinking, right? Chris, if you pay attention, people advertise what they actually want to be doing, right? If you really pay attention and you look at what people are doing, and they will, so what was Chris doing? He was taking it upon himself to fix things around the school. Right.
Sure. Instead of do contact logs,
right,
he would go fix the bags.
He'd be fixing stuff. You know what I mean? And so I paid attention to that. And the reality was, and this is before we had core values, right? But I was like, man, I love Chris, and I know he loves it here. I don't want to fire him because he, one of the things that I played hockey as a kid, and I'll never forget this. I remember, and then I played hockey and then I coached, and I remember as a coach, I would rather have the kid on the ice who wasn't that skilled, who really, really cared. Any day of the week. You give me somebody who really cares, it's like we can find, usually you can find something, right? And Chris really, really cared. He just struggled, to do the front desk, right? So I was like, man, I really want to keep him around. He really loves fixing stuff. I mean, he seems to be wanting to do that on his spare time. Let me find, we're going to eat a little.
Fuck his spare time. He did it when he was supposed to be working.
Right. Yeah. Well, both, but he'd be, but he'd be there on his off days fixing bags, and so I was like, maybe there's a way to make this viable where I can pay him the same amount he was making at the front desk or close to it, and he can do something he actually enjoys, and then he and I won't be butting heads.
And then we needed it done. It's not like we didn't. No, we needed it done.
Exactly. We needed it done, and then that became a position in Denver, and it was later filled by a guy named Matt Horgan, who was incredible, right? But the point is, it was just he had the values, right? And I wasn't even looking at it through that prism now, but now it's an easy decision, right? Now, with the tools I have now, I pay attention, I watch what his strengths are. He shares our values. Man, you share our values. I want you on the team somewhere if I can fit you in, right? Go ahead.
Bring it up to speed. So you were able to diagnose it back then because you're smart, you had intuition, you just kind of know how to work with people. That's what I'm going to say. But if you had the tools today, specifically the GWC, could you walk us through how you would use the GWC to get Chris into that position?
Absolutely. So so now with the tools and this people analyzer chart, and when I say we can link to it, it's like a thing that you can link to, and you can it's like plug and play.
Yeah.
Right. But the GWC. Do they have our core values? If the answer is no, so we do like a plus minus system on that, and if they're not sharing our core values, there is no seat on the bus. They have to go, unfortunately. Right, that's just the wrong person, and we can't have a wrong person in the academy and occupying any role.
At any role,
full stop.
Any role.
Let's be clear too. We're not asking much of our core values, and I don't think anybody should. Right, ours are excellence, trust, compassion, and stewardship. We are a business that caters to people, right, and fighting, and combat and competition. So, excellence is something we should always strive for. trust. I don't want to be in a room with anybody in my life if I can't trust them and actually be on the team with them. There's people like the vendor somewhere that I may not trust, but that doesn't matter. They're not on my team. So trust, easy. Stewardship, that is the way martial arts works. So yes, in any business, you have to be the person that puts the ladder down instead of takes the ladder away when somebody's trying to move up in the company and help them grow. You had a mentor at one point, be the mentor for somebody else. And compassion, man, I'm the kind of person that saves spiders, right? So we expect people to be compassionate to all of those around them. There's obviously levels of compassion, but like, man, if somebody's hurting, we expect them to be compassionate and empathetic towards that individual. So we're not asking much. Right? These are pretty just normal human needs that if you were on the other side of it, you would want people to treat you that way. So again, it's not that hard to be on the bus. We don't ask a lot. Sometimes people just haven't discovered who they are yet. Just wanted to dive into that piece.
It's a good point. It's not like
We're not fucking asking rocket science here.
right. You don't have to be amazing at jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai.
Or Dalai Lama.
Right.
No, and that's a great point because it gets back to what I was saying about the difference between violation and trespassing, and what you were saying, Elliot, about how it kind of bumps south, southeast. Well, here's the thing. An exercise I love to do is take the opposite of each value. What's the opposite of trust? Dishonesty. Right? What's the opposite of excellence? I don't know. There's a lot. There's a lot of words we can throw out there, right? Compassion, right? If you take the opposite of each of these values, you're violating them, right? And when you have someone who's living in violation of these values, they need to go full stop. And I think this is a part where I just don't want to be apologetic, right? If you can't follow the values, that's fine, right? I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but we get to pick and choose who we want on this team, right? And this is very much a team. And we have goals we're trying to accomplish. And to accomplish the goals, we all have to be rowing in the same direction and share the values, right? So that's the first part of the people analyzer. Do they share the values, right? Chris Green, yes, across the board, right? Now, excellence is the one I looked at, I could look at with him, and I'd say plus minus, right? Because he struggles at the front desk. Well, when I moved him over to the handyman role, excellence was there in spades, right? Plus. So a lot of the time that's where you can start, and maybe he's just in the wrong seat. But then we go to the GWC. So we do the core values, pluses across the board, great. Now we look at the GWC for the front desk. Does he get the job? No, not really, right? That's one of the reasons we're struggling. He just doesn't really understand it. He's not. Does he?
Hold on, I'm going to push back on you here. What do you mean doesn't understand it, man? Sit at the front desk, answer the phone, make the phone calls. He understood it.
Yeah, but I
don't agree. I'm not saying I agree with this, but that's the job, right? Like, what do you mean? How do you not get it, man?
Well, here's the thing, right? This is where some accountability as a leader and a manager has to come into play, right? Because one of the things that is my job is I want to make sure everybody understands what their expectations are. Do they really understand the priorities? Do they really understand what matters and what doesn't? Do they have the right belief system, right? All of this stuff has to be taught and role played and practiced. And one of the things that I've learned is not just once. When I first started managing, I would have a conversation with Chris or whomever, and I'd be like, cool. And then they would repeat everything, and we were great. Cool. Everyone gets it. Awesome. Well, that job's done. Well, no, it isn't. You're going to be coming back to that. One of the things that, and this is something Jake Bell used to always say, is you have to move people from being unconsciously incompetent to consciously or to unconsciously competent. And the path goes like this. First, they're unconsciously incompetent, right? Then you get them to the point where they're consciously competent. That means they're doing it right when they're really paying attention. But then you need to get them to unconsciously competent. So they're doing things right on autopilot.
Just like jiu-jitsu.
Second nature. Just like jiu-jitsu, right? And that's continued training. But so just to say, like, maybe I would say Chris didn't quite get it, right? He didn't understand how the contact logs were priority. He would be up doing something else, right? And again, not because he didn't love Easton, he just didn't get it, right? Did he want it? He wanted to be a part of Easton, right?
He would do anything to be a part of Easton,
right?
And at the moment, it was that job, so he's like, whatever, I'll take it.
Yeah, and so did he have the capacity to do it?
No.
Right? Yeah. Well, he had the time and the bandwidth, right? But he didn't just multitasking and computer and tech skills weren't his forte, right? So that was where I was like, okay, I have the right person. I think they might be in the wrong seat, right? Now this is how I look at it. Right person, wrong seat. Is there a right seat? And here's this hard part. This is a part that's true but hard. there might not be a right seat.
Right? Not yet.
Yeah, not
right?
yet.
We can't make up jobs for people just
Right.
because we love them.
Right. You can't do that. Right. But they can be a part of your community. You can continue to work with and try to help them develop. Right. And then the right seat might open up. The opportunity might open up. But that's kind of to answer your question, Mike, that's how I would go through systematically evaluating your staff. But you have to do this. And the thing you have to do, and this is the hardest part, is really be honest with yourself. Right? Because it's easy. Self-deception can creep in very easily here. And I've had it happen to me many times where I can look at somebody, I know, and it especially happens with the wrong person or the wrong person right seat. That's where the self-deception really creeps in. You're like, man, like you can really want to convince yourself that they're following the values because they're doing a good enough job, right? But that will eventually bite you in the ass in a very big way if you don't. You really need to remove people very quickly who are not following your values.
What if they're your best student? What if they're
Well, that's where back to the core values being a thing that we actually guide our ship by, right? Back to the initial part where the values are something you have to be willing to lose friends and money over, right? It doesn't matter. And the person who I was speaking about earlier, the friend of ours, was one of our best students. He was and he was one of the best people we've ever produced. In my opinion.
at the time, as far as produced, far as under me and them all, it's you three.
And he was really good, but
now we're just old.
Now we're all old.
I heard about you and Carlos.
Did he tell you?
He told me, and then he was like, you looked at him and were like, you're dead tomorrow.
This when he tapped you?
That happened, yeah.
When did that happen?
Last week.
Last week?
Yep.
Oh God. Is that gray in your beard I see too?
No, one of yours blew off.
Ian so rarely talks shit back. That was amazing.
When it comes to getting submitted by a brown belt, I can see why.
You get a little testy. Carlos is one of our brown belts in Denver. He's also the GM, and he's very, very talented. So I can lose to Carlos. I can sleep now. I didn't sleep that night, but now I'm.
Let me fine. I know we're all on tight time, but I like this conversation. I want to just kind of ask for another example, and I'm kind of asking questions in the way that really helped me understand these things. So, and Ian, you've been super awesome. I was curious about you. Yesterday, we did an evaluation at one of the schools. We did it together because Ian is the person that is executing the strategy and vision for the company on the front lines. The GMs have their own ships. It is their job. They're the executors, right? We come up with the vision and the strategy, and they take that and they execute it. That's what a GM does. They are key. Everybody's key to the success of a business, but there's something about the general manager role that really makes all this work. So the good general manager is key here. Anyway, part of what we're trying to do now is really come up with a process that helps us grade the general managers, I did terrible in school, right? But not to give them grades to make them feel bad, but to help them know where to improve upon. We have 10 categories, and in this one you're a C, and we can move that dial to help you become a B, and over time it'll just keep going up. So this is part of our process right now that Ian has come up with, and it's amazing. But we're doing it together at first just to make sure we're in line, and that's key to make sure this goes the right way. But what I was going to bring up is Ian experienced something last night that really lines up to this. Specifically the values. This individual shares all the values wholeheartedly, and we love him. And you know that feeling. You know those people that are at your schools, right? You're like, man, this guy, man, I would let him babysit my kids, right? I trust this person. So they have your values, and then you look at them like, man, I want them to succeed so bad. So let's GWC them. Man, I know this person wants it because just like Chris Green, he would do anything for the company. The capacity for it, we think they have it. It depends. We're not sure yet, but they have the time. And that's still up in the air, right? But then the get it part. This is the part that Ian discovered last night. I think it was really cool how he explained it to me, and it was the belief system. And I think this is really about the gi and the selling portion. I think you should talk about that, how you explained it to me, and how you got him to completely switch unconsciously. And then I think after this, we've discussed all the people, what needs to happen, and then from here we can talk about how we're using these systems to help delegate the right roles.
I think that's going to have to be the next podcast when we sit down together in a month, because we've already gone, but yeah, go Ian.
Well, first of all, I want to give this wasn't like mine. I didn't come up with this. Jake Bell, I've been working with. By the way, you should have him on your podcast. He's awesome. But what we were talking about was,
I don't know what you're talking about, Ian. We all each individually came up with everything that we do in this company, right?
I just want to give credit where it's due there.
Yeah.
But no, so essentially what happened was we had one of our rock star front desk staff, right? I had him sell me a program. I just walked in, had him sell me a program, and he did. And then we got to the gi part, right, where he's supposed to say, hey, you're going to need a gi, get me fitted for a gi, and he didn't, right? We didn't even enter that part of the conversation. What I found out was there's a belief problem. It's not that he maybe doesn't know to do it, or obviously he does jiu-jitsu. He understands that
You need a gi.
You need a gi, but there's this, it can create
Kind of.
Yeah, there's
You need a gi.
Yeah, no, you need a gi.
You need a gi.
You need a gi in the beginning, right? But here's the belief system that was operating was he feels like it's too expensive in the first night for someone to come in, spend all the money on the first night, and then buy a gi. That's a lot of money. It's a big ask, and it's going to make them potentially not want to do this, right? And that's just something that you have to help them see. And one of the things I can speak to this, like, so the Art of the Dog is a dog training company that
you guys own.
We own, and one of the things there for me in the beginning, like the program is $4,000. I've never sold anything that expensive, and in the beginning, like there's a real hesitancy. You're like almost embarrassed to admit the price. But once you start really believing in what you do, and we know what we do is amazing. I mean, we say Easton in jiu-jitsu changes your life, right? So you got to look at it like every person who walks out of here that we didn't have the right words for, man, like that's what happened. We didn't have the right words. We couldn't show how special this actually is. So it was getting him to understand that, like, hey, the gis that we sell, our solid gis, I think they're the best gis I've ever owned. Right? I've owned a lot of gis. Show your rolls, all that stuff falls apart in, less than a year if you're training a lot. I've had my solid gis forever, right? So they're actually cheaper, right? Because you're not buying multiple gis every year because they're ripping, right? So it's just basically, it was like reshaping his belief system to accurately map onto what we're doing.
And we don't require our own gi purchase. Like Gracie Baja, for example. You have to buy Gracie Baja gi.
Yeah, you don't have to do that, but you should do that, right? And you should do that because it's better for them, right? It's better for them to get a solid gi that's not going to fall apart in 8 months.
So what's most important, it is better for them. But there's also the unspoken piece too, that as business owners, it's better for the staff, right? Yeah. With the sale of a gi or merchandise, that helps. And for me, the most important thing is the high-level martial arts and careers and opportunities for staff. Those are two things that just weigh heavily on me. And like the gis, that is a massive piece that can help them. Like what do you need to give staff opportunities? You need money. You need money and you need training. And the gis help fill the bottom line so we can take that income and help staff develop as people, help them get the next school. It's not for us, man. I mean, it's great. It is, but it's really to help them get what's next. It also gives them a bump to their income. There's a massive career that they can receive from doing this, right? For the students, yes, it is the best gi.
Well, and look, the student has to have a gi.
Yeah.
They're gonna buy a gi. Like this is just a non-starter, right? Yeah. Is that the right fucking word? Sorry. Yeah. It's a non-starter. They have to have a gi. So if they're going to go spend this money somewhere, get them to do it at yours.
Yeah.
And we don't like forcing it, right? Like we don't want to be like, you have to buy our gi. No, because that goes against our core values.
And we don't. And like, just to say, like, I think this is an interesting thing because if you're listening to this podcast, maybe you're a business owner, right? And so I love what Mike said. And just, I've been working with Mike for a very long time. And one thing I've always appreciated is that the staff is always, and the team are always his first priority, and, it's like that leaders eat last. And Mike very much lives by that. I will say that for to help change the belief system of the staff themselves, I don't think them understanding that it's good for them. I mean, I think that's good, but they actually have to understand it's good for the person that they're selling the gi to. That is the hurdle that you have to get over. and so really understanding that like our gis are really, in my opinion, the best gis we've worn. And now with the way the way they're getting designed, I mean, they're incredible, and we shouldn't be bashful about saying that. And so, yeah, just like I think so at Art of the Dog, to use that analogy again, when I started seeing repeatedly and that people were using Art of the Dog and leaving happier and living good lives with their dogs, it became a thing again, just like jiu-jitsu, where I was like, man, if I don't sell this person a dog training program, I've done them. It's been a detriment, right? I didn't use the opportunity I had to show them how important this is, and I feel like that is the situation every time we sell a jiu-jitsu program or a kickboxing program or a Muay Thai program. It's like, this is a decision that if they walk out of here and don't sign up because we were apathetic that day, or we just weren't in a good mood, or we didn't put our best foot forward, well, then we've done that person a massive disservice. Because I really believe this. Like, I believe that, man, I just believe that jiu-jitsu is something that everybody can benefit from, and if we don't let that happen, then we blew it.
I'm just going to push back like an asshole again.
Do it.
Man, you're just not filling your pocket.
Sorry?
You're just not filling your pocket. If you don't sell the dog program or the jiu-jitsu program or yada, yada, like, so, like, how do you really believe that, right? Like, because, like, there is money attached to it.
Oh, yeah, sure. Oh, you like, how is this?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's an easy question, right? Like, there's without money, right, there is no Easton. Right, there's no jobs. There's no jobs. There's none of this, right? I mean, we can scale it up. You know what I mean? Scale it up, right?
Sure.
Like anytime I look at something like a question like that, I just scale it up, right? How does that scale? And then the answer is it turns into anarchy. Right. There's no jobs. We need institutions. This is a whole other conversation, right? But we need institutions. We need institutions that work, and we need businesses that do things that people value. Mm-hmm. And for that, for them to do the job, there has to be
an exchange of
something, right? This is just how the world works.
But of course, there are evil empires out there, right? I think that's key to pay attention to. And even if they don't start off evil, right? Like maybe Zuckerberg started off evil, maybe Bezos did, but I think there are evil empires that just happen by growth, by accident. But I think there's also these incredible empires that have grown into some really sustainable companies, and because they followed their fucking values, right? And they don't veer from those. And if you can do that, that's why it's the foundation. If you can do that and have a real North Star you're working towards, you're not going to veer out of alignment, right? You're just going to keep staying true to those, checking yourself every night before bed, checking yourself in every meeting, checking yourself and talking about them constantly. We've been on these podcasts a few times, and this is what it always ends up being about, because we can't emphasize the importance of getting this right. So that's how you answer that question, because do you believe in us? Do you believe in what we're doing? You work for us. You spend all your time with us, so you must. So do you think we're trying to line our pockets, or do you think we believe in these values and we're trying to give you something good? Do you think we're doing this for us or for everybody? And I think it's a question people should ask themselves if they're going to work for an organization, and even members and clients. Do they want to be a part of this team?
Yeah. Look, we're going to end there. I got to follow my values and go to therapy.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess the last thing I want to say is, for me, like at least for me personally, and I know everybody uses this as well, is like there's some great resources we talked about today, and the person that really put this on paper in the 80s and 90s and 2000s was Jim Collins. Jim Collins crushed this with all his good to great stuff. That is the foundation of all of this, and then from that's where everything that I think a lot of people at Easton.Online use is the EOS operating system, which is basically a software or a process that is built off of Jim Collins' work. And it makes it super easy to follow, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? And it has everything software driven now, so it's really easy to follow. So these things will get you there. It's not fucking easy, just like there's jiu-jitsu everywhere, but you got to do the work.
Yeah, I think 3 books that are non-negotiable that we talked about are E-Myth. If you haven't read it, you need to. Good to Great, and then Traction Tools. I think all those 3 books, we kind of talked about each one. You'll find everything that we spoke about, like in those 3 books, and I think you need to read them.
Add on Extreme Ownership or one of his books to keep you from being a little fucking victim.
Hell yeah. Guys, look, so, and everyone listening, so the first month was Phipps and Jordan. and now this month is us, the three of us, and then we'll be back. So we're switching every month, so we're going to continue these conversations, and we'll keep going. I enjoyed it today, so I hope all the listeners enjoyed it. Thanks, Mike and Ian. As always, guys, look, go to Easton.Online if you are interested in what it is we're putting out. We have our program that we work with people on, so go Easton.Online. All of the information is there. Check out all the Easton schools. Come see, come visit. A lot of people, it's easy to talk about, but if this is something you're thinking about, hit us up. I had somebody hit me up, a big name in the jiu-jitsu space the other day, who hit me up, and I was just like, look, come out. Like, if you want to see how we do it, come out, and then we'll see where our relationship goes. So, look, we're always open for anybody to come visit and check out what we do. And that's the Easton Training Center schools. And then, as always, the Easton.Online. So whatever you want to do. Mike, thanks. Ian, thanks. Phipps, you're the fucking man getting this all set up, baby. All of the production that you see put out by Easton and Easton.Online is all done by our new director of marketing. Yes, the new director of marketing. Mike delegated that job down, correct? To Mike Tousignant delegated it down to Mike Phipps. So that's it, guys. As always, we appreciate you listening and checking us out. Have a great day.